to share because it's been on my mind a lot. I say this is the one quote that's been on my mind since teaching this class from the beginning. And I read it like 5 years ago in a book, and I was like Googling the book. I don't have the book, like I want to find the exact quote. And I spent like 10 minutes wasting time trying to find this quote. So this is what it is from my memory, okay? The book is from Bishop Barron, who's a great bishop in Los Angeles. He wrote a book about evangelization. He's one of the great evangelists in our culture today. And in this book about evangelization, he quoted this guy named Origen, who was an early Christian thinker. And Origen was a great Christian, very austere, very serious. And there was I think it was a young, pagan man, a man who did not grow up Christian. And he came to Origen and said, you are the most brilliant teacher there is, and he really was. Teach me how to be a Christian, and I want to learn from you. And Origen's like, no, like I can't teach you. He said, come and live with us, and you will be a Christian. Come and live with us. I don't know what happened. Maybe he lived with them, maybe he didn't. But that's what the greatest Christian teacher said to a young person who wanted to become a Christian. Come and live with us. Right? So that's all to say. Like, I'm not here to teach you how to be a Christian. No one can teach you. Even the greatest teacher can't teach you that. It's something that you live. And Origen was pointing to that pillar of community that we've tried to emphasize throughout this class. I would say the culture that we live in is very similar to the early Roman Empire regarding the approach to truth, the approach to religion. And so this quote, even though it was spoken in 253, I would say it applies to today, even maybe more. There will be no Christians by themselves, even now or in the coming years. You will only be a Christian if you have some type of community, some type of support around you where you can flourish in your faith. Okay? So I love that quote. It's been on my mind for forever, so I wanted to share that at the start. Okay, now we're going to cover two topics from last class on the 6th and 9th commandment, which is a very exciting class that we all love, that I didn't cover. And they're kind of important topics. They're kind of unique topics. So the first is divorce, right? One of the sins against marriage that I didn't cover. All right, it's kind of a downer topic, but no, I'm going to try to make it positive. All right, now, the reason we have to cover this is because Jesus speaks very, very specifically and clearly about divorce, okay? And it's also a topic that's relevant today. Every one of us probably is in some way affected by divorce, okay? And Jesus, doesn't always give like direct answers back to questions, right? You probably noticed that if you went to the Palm Sunday Gospel, like, are you the Son of Man? Like, you say that I am. Right? Classic Jesus. There you go. He's always asking a question back, right? He's always doing this. He's always doing it because he doesn't want to get pinned down. Jesus never wants to get pinned down, right? And he understands the words. He understands what others mean by their question, and he doesn't want to answer because they have the wrong meaning, right? They don't say the question right. But there's one moment, and probably a few others, where Jesus speaks very directly in answering a question. And this is about marriage. All right, so we have to read this. All right, so this is Matthew 19, verses 1 through 12. Now when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And the Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one'? So they are no longer two, but one. What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away?" He said to them, "For your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity and marries another commits adultery. And he who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. The disciples said to him, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it is not expedient to marry. But he said to them, not all men can receive this precept, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. He who is able to receive this, let him receive it. Okay. Now, in my little Catholic study Bible, there's a whole page on here, right here. This whole page is trying to determine what Jesus means when he says, except for unchastity, right? He says, no divorce. There's no divorce except for unchastity. What does he mean by that? Most likely, Jesus means that it actually means like you weren't married in the first place because somehow you were like related, and that original marriage actually wasn't a marriage because it couldn't have happened, right? You can't marry a close relative. It's impossible. Okay? The sacrament doesn't take effect. So, anyways, there's a lot to say about this passage, but I wanted to just make sure we cover this because it comes up a lot in our parishes today. It comes up a lot, unfortunately. So, yeah, I don't think I'll touch on that in just a moment. Let me say this, though, that, of course, in cases where there is an unhealthy situation, separation is possible. Right? The spouses don't have to stay together if it's not a safe situation. Okay? But what God has joined together, no man must put asunder. Right? So what Jesus says about marriage is just so different than the way we think about it and the way that we have experienced it. That it's going to take a lot of kind of reading and digesting for, I think, us all to come to a conclusion about it. Okay? I can't really say more than that. We have to go on. But the reason Jesus isn't being overly demanding here, like this seems pretty demanding. No divorce at all. One person, my whole life. Like, really? No divorce. But the reason he's not being overly demanding is because he promises the grace. And he promises the grace to fulfill that covenant of marriage. Right? He raises marriage to a sacrament. And so he expects couples to live marriage, not by their own power, actually, but with his help, under his guidance and his grace. Okay? And so this is why Jesus does make it a high call, right? He restores it to the beginning. In the beginning it was not so. But he does this because he promises the grace to help. Okay? All right. Guess how many people marry? What percentage of people get married? Any guesses? I just read this stat the other day. Like, of all people.
43%.
64.
Way higher.
85.
88.
Wow.
Yeah, 88% of people get married.
Wait,
Is it literally just like married?
what are the rest?
Yeah, this is just like what percentage of people get married, like at least once.
Is this worldwide or just the U.S.?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What do you think? Do you think it's a bit high?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
It's high?
I would say it's high for the
That's
U.S.
high, yeah. Do you know what percent divorce?
Divorce,
50?
50 was going down apparently. Here's the better question. How many people get divorced who are practicing the Catholic faith? And that's, yeah, there's a lot of stats, good stats on that. And also, how many people get divorced that never lived together before they're married? A lot of good stats on that as well. So, cohabitation before marriage tends to increase divorce rates. Okay, so secondly, another great topic that I needed to cover, I didn't cover last time, but briefly, is modesty. This is part of the 9th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, right? And you won't covet your neighbor's wife if your neighbor's wife is being modest, right? And we won't covet each other if we are modest, okay? This is just, one thing I want to say about this is that this is in the realm of chastity, right? Chastity requires modesty. It requires us to dress modestly, to speak modestly, right? Because we are flesh and blood creatures attracted to all sorts of things we shouldn't be attracted to, okay? And the virtue of modesty is especially important in relation to others, but at the Holy Mass, at the Sunday liturgy. Okay, so this is like a little plug for wearing your Sunday best a little bit too. Okay, so I don't want to get into specifics. I'm not going to get into specifics besides at Mass we should dress nicely. You should dress nicely for Mass. Simply as that, because it's an act of love. It's an act of love towards your neighbor if you dress nicely, and that same thing towards God. If you dress nicely at Mass, it's an act of love towards God. I'm trying not to draw attention to yourself, but presenting yourself in a way that it's loving towards others. It protects others from sinning against their chastity. Okay, so that's modesty. Okay, divorce and modesty, two great topics. Now, on to our last commandments, okay? The 7th, 8th, and 10th commandments. The 7th commandment, anyone get it right? Thou shalt not. Give a quiz, give a pop quiz. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal. Okay? Thou shalt not steal. Now, in order to steal something, what has to be? It has to be somebody's property, right? And so the sin of stealing presupposes private property, like that's Chance's phone, right? It's not just a phone; it's Chance's phone, right? And why is it your phone? It's your property. You bought it, right? Yeah, it's yours. Okay. Now, the right to private property is sort of a natural extension of our freedom. There's been experiments, I think, and they've mainly failed, of governments trying to get rid of all private property, right? Like communism, socialism, right? Getting rid of all private property. And that ends up limiting our freedom, right? We have a natural right to the things that we have earned. We have a natural right to them, right? And this is a good thing because this incentivizes people to work. It incentivizes us to take responsibility and to do our duty. It also tends to make us take care of things. Right? Chance takes care of his phone because it's his phone. But if we all shared, one phone, who's going to take care of it, right? That's kind of the argument for private property, a natural right to private property. Some goods can be mine, and this is good. Now, however, this right to private property is not absolute. It's not absolute. Right? It's balanced by another principle called the universal destination of goods. So private property and the universal destination of goods. All right, so let's say it's not a cell phone that Chance has, but it's an ear of corn, and I'm about to die. I haven't eaten in 3 weeks. Okay, but it's Chance's ear of corn because he planted it, he watered it, he paid taxes on the land. It's all his, right? But I'm about to die. Can I take it? Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no longer his. It's actually mine. It's actually mine. He's alive, right? Why is it mine? Well, because Chance's right to private property is not absolute, right? It's balanced by this universal destination of goods, right? God, in a sense, gave all of creation to everyone. All of creation to everyone. Universal destination. All the goods are meant for everyone, okay? So private property is not an absolute right, okay? Okay? Now, at the same time, private property is a good, but this is Catechism 2404. In our use of external goods, man should regard these goods he owns not merely as exclusive to himself, but common to others also, in the sense that they can benefit others as well as himself. The ownership of property makes its holder a steward. That is a very important word. Steward of providence. All right, steward. With the task of making it fruitful and communicating its benefits to others, first of all, his family. Okay? The seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal, brings with it, and we'll get into this, brings with it all of Catholic social teaching. Right? All of the church's teachings about how the goods of creation relate to each other and how we relate to them. All of that is encompassed underneath the seventh commandment. So it's not really just about stealing. There's a whole bunch of other things that fall into it, at least in the catechism. Okay? And one of those is just how we use our private property, how we make use of the goods that we have. Okay? It says that the goods of production, material or immaterial, such as land, factories, practical or artistic skills, oblige their possessors to employ them in ways that would benefit the greatest number. Right? That's amazing. The goods of production oblige their possessors to employ them in ways that will benefit the greatest number. Okay, little story. In this church, we have some beautiful mosaics. Very beautiful. And they were built, they were constructed in the United Arab Emirates. Why? Because the Italians who were putting them together had working on another job in the United Arab Emirates. And so they were there, all the artists were there working on this other job, and they had to do our stuff, so they did it there and shipped it over here. And anyways, when they came over here, two Italian guys came here and they were installing mosaics. And I was really interested in these guys, because I was just talking to them, and they were putting up the mosaic, and I was like, oh, what do you guys do? Like, besides churches, what do you work on? Because I heard you guys were like in the United Arab Emirates and in the Middle East. And they're like, yeah, well, we do a lot of mosques, and the Saudis and that, they put together a lot of money, and they want mosaics like in their mosques and that. So like, well, that's pretty cool. Mosques and churches, and like, what else? And he goes, oh, the biggest thing we do, though, is yachts. Yachts. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, like, most of the time, I'm putting in mosaics in bathrooms on yachts. Like, that's, or pools. Or pools.
Inside the swimming pool.
Inside the swimming pool. On a yacht. Okay. I haven't watched. I'm sure there's TV shows about these people. Maybe like the Filthy Rich, something.
Yeah.
But apparently, rich people have mosaics in their bathrooms, on their yachts, in their pools, on their yachts. Okay. Now, when he told me that, I reflected on that for a while, and I came to the conclusion that this is an abomination. Like, I wanted to use like the strongest word as I can. Right? This is really, really not good. Okay? Why? Don't people have the right to do what they want with their money? If they're rich, can't they just build themselves a great yacht and, you know, have a cool bathroom? No, actually. No, look, the goods of production, material, immaterial, such as land, factories, practical, oblige their possessors to employ them in ways that will benefit the greatest number. Those who hold goods for use and consumption should use them with moderation. Okay, so in my judgment, this was just not moderation. This was something very excessive. Okay. Reserving the better part for guests, for the sick, and for the poor. Okay? So, if you get filthy rich, build a mosque or, no, don't build a mosque. Build a church. Build a church. But I must say what the Saudis were doing with their money was better than the rich Americans, in my judgment. So, there you go. Little story, a lot of my opinion, but I think it's pretty based in pretty good Catholic social teaching. Okay. We're obliged to use our material goods for the benefit of others. Okay, I'm not saying you can't have your cabin on a lake where you go and relax, but it would probably be better if it was, you know, not just for you, but used for others as well. Maybe you let your friends go, whatever, right? You're able to share with others. Okay. So again, this is the natural right to private property balanced by the universal destination of goods. Okay. Our right to private property is also limited by legitimate authority. Okay. What's everyone going to do tomorrow? There you go. Well, we're going to pay taxes. That is terrible. I don't like doing it, but we're going to do it. Why? Because a legitimate political authority has limits my right to private property or my private goods. My money is not mine. Right? And that's what goes to the government. I mean, I drove on a nice interstate today, so I was thinking about that. I was thinking about my tax bill. I'm like, all right, this road's pretty good, so I'll pay my taxes. Now, we also must respect the goods of others. This is part of the seventh commandment, right? The seventh commandment forbids theft, right? That is taking another's property against the reasonable will of the owner. Okay. This can be done not just by theft, but also by fraud, right? By corruption, even by work that's done poorly. Maybe a way of stealing from others, right? If someone, you know, if you sign a contract to do a certain job and you do a poor job, you're stealing. Okay. And at times, this requires, when a sin of theft is committed, it requires restitution. Right, is to give back the goods that were stolen or some type of equal value, and that can be required for justice. Right, Jesus, remember, meets Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus says, "If I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." And Jesus is very pleased with Zacchaeus in that moment. Jesus doesn't condemn him for his sin, right? Offers him mercy, and Zacchaeus promised to restore what he's stolen, and he's forgiven. Okay. Lastly, one interesting part of the seventh commandment is that it's okay to gamble. Just don't gamble too much. Okay, games of chance or wagers are not in themselves contrary to justice. They become morally unacceptable when they deprive someone of what is necessary for his needs or those of others. The passion for gambling risks becoming an enslavement. All right, and I did drive past Ho Chung Gaming today as well, and sadly many people are there a lot, and especially in poor areas, there are places where like casinos want to move in, and as soon as the casino moves in, the whole good of the area tends to go down. In many ways, a lot of bad things follow from that, but it's okay in moderation. Again. Okay. All right. Moving on to some more of the seventh commandment. Very interesting that the Catechism includes in the seventh commandment our relationship to creation. But remember that the seventh commandment is talking about all of the created goods. All of the created goods and our relationship to them. All right? So think of what is in creation that we relate to. Well, one of them is animals, right? Plants, just the land itself. We have a relationship with all of these things, right? And we must respect creation. We must respect the integrity of creation. Right? It says animals are destined for the common good, right? And we have some saints in our tradition that really loved animals and showed us how much glory these animals give to God, especially St. Francis of Assisi and St. Philip Neri. Right? And it's true that the human person has put some animals to extinction, right? It's kind of, think about that theologically. Like God created that animal, and we destroyed it. It's not coming back. I don't know if we can find some DNA and do some stuff to make it come back, but it's kind of an amazing thing, actually, that man has done in a bad way. And so, in a sense, we've stolen from creation by the destruction that we have caused. It is legitimate to use animals for the good of the human person, right? Because again, they're stewards, right? We have to be stewards of creation, and only the human person is made in the image and likeness of God. So that therefore the human person is at a much higher dignity than the animals. So we can hunt animals, we can eat them, we can, even use them for clothing. As long as, again, it's in moderation. And it's in this spirit of stewardship. Okay? Right? Jesus says, consider the birds of the air. And we know the animals gave a lot of glory to God. Who doesn't like to hear the birds singing? Right? It's like the best. I love hearing the birds singing. And I'm a kind of personal fan of Aldo Leopold. You've probably read him in your classes a little bit, hopefully. Awesome conservationist who I think went to school here. I'm not sure. Did he? Okay. And I thought I'd read a quote from him that I like. He said, conservation will ultimately boil down to rewarding the private landowner who conserves the public interest. And I thought that was a good juxtaposition with private and public and how we're supposed to use the goods that we have for the public interest. And in his book, Sand County Almanac, Aldo Leopold talks a lot about how these plants that he loves are kind of disappearing and all of that. And he has a great relationship to creation. And I think he wasn't Catholic, but I think he had a Catholic spirit about him in his relationship to creation.
He didn't attend UW-Madison, but he was a professor.
Professor? Okay, cool. Thanks, Michael. Yeah. So, and as maybe an anecdote, side note, one of the things coming up now in the state of Wisconsin is like the quality of groundwater. And you've maybe seen this in the news. Apparently, it's getting like national headlines. Different newspapers are picking it up. And the new governor is kind of making it one of his bigger pushes. But in the southwest part of the state where I'm from, something like 42% of the wells are like contaminated, or they're not. They're at the dangerous levels of like nitrates and all these other things. So, anyways, our relationship to creation is right here is a bit thrown off, and water's pretty darn important. So, make sure we take care of that. But if we're not stewards of creation, if we seek to dominate creation, creation rebels against us. So many different authors have said this. If we dominate creation, it rebels against us. We have to be stewards. Right? And a steward, what exactly is a steward? It's someone with solidarity. Someone with solidarity with the next generation. Someone who has. Someone who has solidarity with the next generation, right? Because the people in the 2 generations, 3 generations from now are going to have to get their water from the ground, most likely, unless we do something else with desalination. I don't know what could happen there. But, right? Solidarity with the next generation. Okay. Now, the other part of the 7th commandment, as I mentioned, covers what's known as Catholic social teaching. Okay. Remember, we said the human person is rational, free, embodied, and social. Right? The human person is social, so the Catholic Church, caring about the human person, also cares about society as a whole. Like the Church has social teaching. It has social teaching. It means the Church does not simply teach on spiritual matters. Right? And the Church is not aloof from temporal matters. Right? Nor was Jesus. Jesus said famously, right, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God's. Right? That was his, that's the basis right there of Catholic social teaching. Okay? And the Church cares about temporal matters. It cares about society because society affects our ultimate end. Right? It's easier for people to go to heaven if they grow up in a good society. Right? There's a great close relationship between society and our spiritual life, between our religious life and our social, or life in the world. Okay? All right, now the Church, however, does not take the place of Caesar, right? Does not take the place of the government. Okay, the Catechism says the Church makes a moral judgment about economic and social matters when the fundamental rights of the person or the salvation of souls requires it. Okay, the Church doesn't make judgments on everything, but it does make judgments and does step in when it needs to. Okay? Catholic social teaching started in the late 1900s, right around the time of like Industrial Revolution, a lot of factories, people were being used, and a lot of bad things were happening. The Church stepped in and actually like defended the right for people to organize themselves in unions and everything like that.